Why is housing so expensive here in Waterloo Region? Well, there are a lot of reasons, of course, but there's one really big thing that nobody's talking about that I'm going to talk about today, starting right now. Hey, it's Andrew Shackleton, Kitchener-Waterloo real estate broker, Drew at home.com. So, sky-high house prices in Waterloo Region. This is in the news all the time. From the province, from builders, from the real estate community, you hear, we're not building enough housing. Zoning's too restrictive. We've got to, build on the green belt. You hear from the public, foreign buyers are buying everything. It's the investment community. And even calls, unpleasant ones. Well, we're letting too many immigrants into the country. So all these factors, immigration, not building enough housing, zoning, they all play a role in, putting demand on our housing situation. But the funny thing is, we've got this demand. I also see that we're building tons and tons of housing. So you drive around Waterloo Region. I've been in the business for a while. You go to the suburbs, you go to Huron Park, you go to, Grand River South, new builds galore. Same with Uptown Waterloo, same with downtown Kitchener. There's tower cranes everywhere. And the funny thing is, not only are lots of properties being built, but my local real estate board, twice in the past month, has put out press releases talking about record numbers of sales last year and then just this last month. So that's kind of an odd thing. We've got sky-high demand, lots of houses being built, and lots of houses being bought and sold. Kind of crazy, something's wrong, something doesn't make sense. And this isn't just unique to Waterloo Region or Canada. This same situation is going on in many G7 economies and in other places throughout the world. Now, UBS, they've got a bubble index, and there's a lot of cities, Toronto and Vancouver being two of them, that make the bubble list. There's a whole bunch of other cities as well that they would consider overvalued. And the funny thing is, this isn't a coincidence. You've got all these other places all over the world, all at the same time, having, record demand and sky-high prices. Something's going on. So the factor that's the foundation of all of this is actually ultra-low interest rates. And this didn't happen overnight. You can see the results of this going all the way back to the 2008 financial meltdown. Now have a look at these other major world currencies and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll show you their graph and then I'll show you Canada's. So when the Great Recession of 08 and 09 hit, of course, the housing market in the US, the US Fed dropped interest rates down to almost nothing. And of course, Canada followed suit, as did many other economies throughout the world. Now, Bank of Canada, what they call the overnight rate, it's the lowest rate that the bank offers, that historically has been at 5%, 5.8% average for the last 30 years. Now we dropped it from over 4% down to 0.25% almost overnight back in 08 in response to the recession. And it's basically remained low ever since. Out of the last 13 years, the interest rate has been at 1% or lower for 10 of those last 13 years. So that's what's driving this. That's what's behind the sky-high prices we're seeing. It's actually what is known as a demand feedback loop. Now, interest rate policy, this is something central bankers and economists do to try to regulate an economy. You either raise rates to slow the economy down or you drop rates to try and improve economic activity. But it's a dangerous tool. It's hard to control. And if you leave it too long, it creates unwanted excess buyer demand. And that's exactly what we've seen here in Canadian real estate really for the last 5 or 6 years. It works like this. You lower rates, new buyers get into the market, more than normal, and that starts to put upward pressure on prices. You have a couple years, 2, 3 years, 4 years of steady returns in real estate, 4 or 5% a year. That's steady, it's safe. The investment community and foreign buyers, they start coming into our marketplace as well. There's no regulation stopping them, and they're looking to park their money in a safe location, and in the case of investors, get a return on it as well. So they start putting upward pressure on prices. Then you get what I call the fear of missing out crowd. And they're starting to get desperate because no matter how much they might save in a year, prices are rising faster than they can save. So they're going to hop on government programs like 5% down, any kind of programs that federal or local governments offer to help you get into real estate. They're going to take advantage of that. And in some cases, they're also going to the bank of ma and pa and getting money from their parents. So you've got this intergenerational wealth transfer as well. That's also putting upward pressure on prices. That's exactly what we've got going on with Canadian real estate. Have a look at this graph. You want to see the evidence. It's clear as day. So here's how this all played out. We've got to go back a little bit prior to 2016, back to 2014. So back then, real estate was just a safe, almost, not for me, boring thing, stable, right? And in 2014, Harper's coming up for re-election. So same time, we've got oil at $120 a barrel at the start of the year. It plummets down to 60. And of course, for anybody in Calgary in the oil patch, this is massively bad. TSX is going to drop 17% over the next year as well. Now, as I mentioned, central bankers will screw around with interest rates to try to get the economy going again. And in this case, Stephen Poloz, the new Bank of Canada governor, he drops rates from 1% to 0.5%, pretty much just before Harper's coming up for election. So this is going to give a little kickstart to the economy, and in the case of Harper, hopefully help him get reelected. Of course, we know what happened. Harper lost and Trudeau was in with a massive majority. 2015, very little happens with housing. I think house prices went up in 2015 around 5%. It wasn't until 2016 things really started taking off with real estate, and it got even crazier in 2017. I remember this. House prices were going up 10 grand a week. Now, the federal government didn't seem to care, but locally, the provincial Liberals under Wynne and in Vancouver, they both put in foreign buyers taxes. Now, that chilled things out in our market for probably 6 or 8 months. I remember there was a big discount at the end of the year compared to what you would have paid in the spring of 2017. And of course, 2018, 2019, prices just right back up again. Now, at the time, as I said, the Fed didn't really seem to want to do too much. They raised rates, gradually over time, but it wasn't enough. And the only thing they did was bring in this stress test. The stress test, it was a failure, an absolute failure as far as it doing anything. The only thing it did was punish, new people trying to get into the market, people that are just starting out. It didn't stop foreign buyers. It didn't stop investors. And I can tell you this, once the pandemic hit, this lack of regulation on the part of the federal government is going to come back to bite them in the butt. And, that's where we're at right now. I can tell you this, it's a problem with liberal and conservative governments alike. They've both got this, neoliberal, laissez-faire kind of free market capitalism mindset, and that's part of the problem. They just, let the mortgage industry run amok, and money is way, way too cheap. Okay, now let's talk about where we're at right now in 2020, start of the pandemic into 2022. Here's a graph of the TSX versus interest rates. And as you can see, it absolutely shot through the roof after tanking in the spring of 2020. Now that happened in the States as well. The Dow Jones and the S&P 500, they were massively nosediving. And I remember Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, he was saying, we'll do anything we can to stop this crash. And they did. They dropped rates down to nothing and started up the money printer. We did the same thing here. We've been printing money like crazy. We've got rates at almost nothing. Oh, here's the rub. Here's why this is bothering me. We have sacrificed affordable housing on the altar of making money for the stock market and the wealthiest members of Canadian society. That's a huge problem as far as I'm concerned. It's way too, cowboy capitalism, let's make money. I've got clients who couldn't afford to buy, and house prices have shot through the roof. They'll never be able to buy. They didn't have barely enough money when I met them, and they couldn't get in. I've got investor clients who've got to be super careful with what they buy because prices have risen so much, it's hard to make your investment cash flow positive. This is probably the most telling story. I've got a young guy, he sold his place, he wants to buy something bigger, he wants to buy a 2-bedroom. He's a programmer, he makes top dollar for a very, very well-known tech firm, and he can barely afford a 2-bedroom. So this is insanity that we've got a housing market where the only people who can afford to buy are people who are married that are both making huge incomes. That's why I wanted to talk about this, this situation today. Everything the federal, provincial governments, my industry organizations be talking about, oh, we got to build houses, we got to build houses. Yeah, that would help. And some of the things we're talking about with foreign buyers and investment, there's things we could do to curtail that as well. But the underlying problem of rates being too low is what's driving all of this. And if we don't fix rates, this problem is not going to go away. That's, the reality of it. The thing is, the government's not stupid. They know they've caused this problem. And in fact, they've been talking about raising rates, but it's not got any relation to housing, even though it does. What they've been saying is, oh my God, we've got to do this because inflation's through the roof. Well, guess why inflation's through the roof? You've been running the money printer full tilt. You drop rates down to nothing. That's massively inflationary. So now they've got no choice. Just has the side effect that it's also going to be hopefully enough to dampen demand in our housing market. There's 3 ways it can go. I'm not sure whether it's going to work. I'll give you the 3 scenarios. So they don't raise rates enough and house prices keep shooting through the roof. Well, this already happened just last week when they were supposed to raise rates and didn't. The next scenario, they raise rates too much. It tanks the economy. House prices in the stock market fall. They panic. They drop rates again. House prices shoot up again. And then lastly, this is a Goldilocks in the 3 bears scenario. They get everything just right. They put rates up enough to dampen demand in the housing market, and at the same time, they don't tank the economy. Well, this last one I just mentioned, this is going to be the hardest one to pull off. But that's your 3 scenarios. Now, we got to do something, and I think personally, it starts with regulation. We got to get some kind of control on how we finance housing that's removed from the broader stock market and, global economy, because that's the problem. We can't sacrifice affordability just because we're concerned about the stock market. That's not right. I am seeing our world turn into a have and have not society based on owning real estate or not. That can't be good going forward. We got to do something about it. We need regulation. Anyways, I was kind of shocked when I pulled this data. I thought I needed to share it with you. It's a really interesting topic. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching and have yourself an awesome day.